During shopping, my 8-year-old clutched my hand and said, "Mom, quickly, to the bathroom." In the stall, she whispered, "Don't move, look." I bent down and froze in horror. I didn't cry. I took action. 3 hours later, my mother-in-law went pale because I used to laugh at kids' fears. Not out loud, not cruelly, just the quiet adult kind of amusement. Monsters under the bed, shadows in the hallway. Someone's watching me. Sure, honey. Then one Sunday, I was crouched on a sticky bathroom floor in a mall outside Columbus, Ohio, holding my 8-year-old's hand while polished black shoes stopped in front of our stall, and a man's voice, low and calm, said into his phone, "Yeah, mother and daughter. The girl's about 8. They've got shopping bags. Blue dress." Blue dress. My daughter had picked it out 10 minutes earlier. It was in our bag. That's when the cute childhood fears category died. Abby's grip on my fingers was so tight it hurt. She didn't look at me. She didn't need to. She put a finger to her lips like we were in a movie. Except in movies, the bathroom floor isn't tacky, and your heart doesn't try to climb out through your throat. "Don't move," she whispered. So I didn't. I watched the shoes through the gap under the stall door. Slow steps. Stop. Slow steps. Stop. Like he was checking each stall, one by one. Like he had time. The shoes paused right in front of ours. Abby's breath disappeared. Mine too. Then the shoes moved on again, and the voice continued like he was giving a weather report. "They should have come this way. If they didn't leave already, yeah. I'll keep looking." My brain tried to catch up. Man in a women's restroom, looking for us, describing our shopping bags. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a hunt. I pulled my phone out with shaking hands and hit record because if there's one thing working in healthcare teaches you, it's this. If it isn't documented, it didn't happen. The shoes circled once more, then stopped. A stall door creaked. Another creaked. Abby's eyes went huge. That's when I did the only thing I could do without giving us away. I called 911. Not a dramatic call. No screaming. Just woman's restroom, man inside. Following us. 8-year-old with me. Please. The response came fast. "Stay where you are. Officers are on the way. Notify mall security if you can safely." Mall security. Bless the American tradition of outsourcing panic to a guy in a polo shirt. But at least it was something. When the shoes drifted toward the sinks, I grabbed Abby and we slipped out like smoke. Fast, quiet, bags clutched tight. We ran straight to the security office like our lives had a loyalty card. The guard looked skeptical. Of course he did. 2 women bursting in with shopping bags and wild eyes isn't credible. It's Black Friday energy. "What's going on?" he asked, already bracing for a complaint about a coupon. Abby, trembling, described the man perfectly. The shoes, the suit, the camera strap. And then I played the audio. His face changed in real time. "That's not normal," he said. "No kidding." He pulled up the cameras. We watched the footage like it was a horror film with a budget. And there he was, mid-40s, dark suit, neat hair, holding a small camera like it was an accessory, not a weapon. He walked with the confidence of someone who believed rules were for other people. Security tracked him through the building. 30 minutes later, they found him. He didn't run. He didn't even look surprised. When the guard questioned him, the man calmly flashed a plastic card. "I'm Brian Douglas Hartman," he said. "Licensed private investigator. I'm conducting an investigation." "What investigation?" the guard asked. "I can't disclose that," Hartman replied smoothly. Confidentiality. And then he said something that should have been funny, except it wasn't. But I'm not doing anything illegal. A PI, in a women's restroom, searching for a mother and child. Sure. Security called the police anyway, because even in America, a badge you bought online doesn't magically excuse you from common sense. A cruiser arrived about 20 minutes later. An officer took one look at Abby and softened. Then he looked at Hartman and didn't soften at all. Hartman was escorted out. And that's when my phone rang. Mike, my brother-in-law. Kate, he said, breathless. Are you okay? I heard something happened. I blinked. Mike? How do you know? I saw it online, he said quickly. People were posting. A suspicious guy at the mall. I thought it might be you. It had been less than an hour. Maybe in the age of neighborhood apps and local Facebook groups, that wasn't impossible, but it still landed wrong, because Mike always seemed to know things before I told him. I'm coming, he said. Where are you? We're with police, I answered. They want statements at the station, but I can drive myself. I'm coming anyway. He hung up before I could argue. Of course he did. 2 years earlier, my husband David died in a car crash. 1 minute you're arguing about whether to buy name-brand cereal. The next, you're signing forms you can't read through tears. After that, everything in my life became a schedule. Shifts, bills, school pickup, survival with occasional spaghetti. I'm a nurse. 12-hour shifts. The kind where you come home and your bones feel borrowed. Abby and I made a routine out of the wreckage. Homework at the kitchen table, cartoons after dinner, spaghetti night whenever we needed comfort we could chew. David loved tomato sauce. He used to grow basil in a little planter box on our balcony like it was a sacred ritual. One evening at the grocery store, Abby said casually, pushing the cart like she owned the place, I have a math test tomorrow. Are you ready? I asked, because that's what moms do when they're trying not to think about everything else. I'm fine, she said. Then, quieter. But Grandma Maggie keeps asking if school is hard, like she wants me to say yes. I paused in the rice aisle. My mother-in-law, Margaret Louise Miller, Grandma Maggie to Abby, had been interested lately. Not the normal grandma interested, the measuring kind. Does your mom help you? Is she home much? Does she leave you alone? She always said it like concern, but it tasted like something else. When we got home, Abby helped me with dinner, peeling tomatoes while I tried not to drown in memories. Dad would like this, she said softly. I swallowed. Yeah, he would. Let's buy basil next time, she added. The kind Dad grew. I nodded, because saying no to that would have felt like erasing him. We were finally sitting down to eat when the doorbell rang. It was around 8, late enough that you don't expect company unless it's trouble. I opened the door and found Mike standing there with a small bouquet of flowers, like this was normal. Hey, he said gently. I just wanted to check on you two. Mike was David's younger brother, recently divorced, still carrying that lonely look like a coat he couldn't take off. Abby squealed because she loved people before she learned they could be complicated. Mike lifted her into his arms and handed her a little box. Inside was a plush character from her favorite cartoon. She lit up. I didn't. Because we hadn't told Mike her favorite character. Not really. Not enough for him to know exactly which one to buy. That night, after Abby fell asleep, I sat alone with my coffee and tried to be fair. He's lonely. He misses his brother. He misses having a family. Fine. But then his visits became scheduled. Every day around 6, the doorbell rang. like Mike had set an alarm. He always brought something: candy, school supplies, another toy. At first I was grateful, then I was tired. By the second week, Abby started sighing when the bell rang. "He's here again," she'd whisper, and her smile would dim just a little. Mike would sit on the couch and talk about how empty his apartment felt, how we were a bright spot, how David would have wanted him to watch over us. That line, "David would have wanted," became his master key. He used it on every locked door. I tried once, carefully. "Mike, maybe not every day," I said, aiming for kind instead of harsh. "We're exhausted sometimes." He blinked, like the idea offended him. Then he apologized, and showed up the next day anyway. Of course he did. One night he said, casually, like he was reading off a calendar, "Can I come watch Abby rehearse her class presentation? Next Thursday. 2:00, right?" My skin went cold. "How do you know the day and time?" I asked. "Abby told me," he said, smiling. I looked at Abby. She looked confused. "I didn't," she said slowly. Mike laughed awkwardly. "Oh, maybe I heard it another way." "Another way. Sure." He showed up at school anyway, sat in the auditorium among the parents like he belonged there, like he was filling David's seat. After Abby presented, Mike handed her a tiny bouquet. She said thank you, politely. In the car, on the way home, Abby stared out the window and whispered, "Mom, I get tired when Uncle Mike comes." "Why, honey?" She hesitated. "It feels like he's watching me, like he knows everything I love. But I don't remember telling him." Kids don't have a filter. They also don't have a reason to lie about that. So I started watching Mike. The way his eyes moved around our living room, the way he picked up framed photos and held them a second too long, the way he looked at Abby's schoolwork like it was evidence. One afternoon, he mentioned something that hadn't even been discussed in our house yet. "Oh, Abby must be excited for the zoo field trip next month," he said with a grin. "Packing lunches will be a challenge, huh?" I froze. The zoo flyer had been handed out the day before. It was on Abby's desk under a stack of papers. I hadn't even read it yet. "Where did you hear that?" I asked carefully. "From Abby," he said quickly. Abby's head snapped up. "I didn't tell him." Silence filled the room. Mike laughed, forced. "I must have mixed it up." No, he didn't. That night I noticed something else. The school papers in Abby's desk were arranged. Not messy, not stuffed. Organized. "Did you clean your drawers?" I asked her. She shook her head. "No." The next day, I watched from the second-floor window as Mike left. He paused outside, turned, and stared up into our living room window like he was checking something. My stomach dropped. Abby came up behind me and whispered, "Mom, Uncle Mike is weird, right?" "What makes you think that?" "He always asks where we're going, when you work, if we'll be home Saturday. Why does he need to know?" Then came the moment that broke my last attempt at maybe I'm overreacting. Mike asked for a spare key. "Just in case," he said. "If something happens to you, I need access. I'm family." "No," I said immediately. He frowned. "Your neighbor isn't family." "Valerie has helped us for years," I snapped, "and she doesn't demand keys." Mike's voice sharpened. "David would want me to take care of this." Something inside me snapped right back. "Don't use my husband as leverage," I said. That's when Abby, barely audible, said, "Uncle, you're kind of scary." For a split second, Mike's face changed, hard, almost hungry. Then it smoothed out again into a smile. "Scary uncle just wants to protect you," he said sweetly. Abby moved behind me. Her instinct knew something my grief kept trying to deny. The mall trip was supposed to be a break. New clothes, because Abby was growing like she had a secret contract with time. Milkshakes, a normal Sunday. She found the blue dress and spun in the fitting room like the world was safe again. We walked through the stores, bags getting heavier. We sat at the food court with milkshakes and fries, and Abby sighed happily. "This is fun," she said. "When Uncle Mike isn't around, we can relax." That one hurt, because she was 8, and she shouldn't have needed relaxing as a concept tied to an adult relative. Then she said something that turned my stomach. "Uncle Mike came by when you weren't home," she said quietly. "What?" "Last Wednesday. He was outside our building when I got home from school. He asked if you were back yet. I told him I was going to Ms. Valerie's after. He said, okay. Then he left. Wednesday was my late shift. I didn't get home until after 9. Mike shouldn't have known Abby would be alone at pickup, or that she'd be going to Valerie's. I felt cold all over. We threw away our empty cups and headed for the exit. That's when Abby stopped walking. "Mom," she whispered. Her face went white. "That man." I followed her gaze. A man at the food court. Dark suit. Black shoes. "Abby," I started. "Bathroom," she said urgently. "Now!" The panic in her voice wasn't normal. It wasn't dramatic. It was survival. So we moved. Fast. She pulled me into the women's restroom and stopped again at the door like she couldn't breathe. "Come with me," she begged. "It's okay." I tried. "No. Together." So we went into one stall. Together. 2 bodies, 1 cramped space. My shopping bags pressed against my knees, her hand shaking in mine. Then the shoes came, and the voice came, and the blue dress became proof we were being tracked. You already know what happened next, because that's where this story started. But here's what happened after. We got out, we ran, we showed security, we found Hartman, and then we went to the police station. At the station, the fluorescent lights made everything look worse. Even my own hands. Abby sat beside me, quiet, holding my sleeve like it was the only stable thing in the room. Hartman sat across the hallway, still calm, still polished. Like this was an appointment, not a crime. Mike showed up before we were even done giving our statement. His face was pale. He rushed to Abby first, crouching to her level. "Are you okay?" he asked. Abby nodded, but she didn't move toward him. That was new. A detective interviewed Hartman. At first, Hartman didn't want to talk. Then the detective explained, calmly, what entering a women's restroom to pursue a child looks like in court. Hartman's confidence cracked. Finally, he said it. "I was hired," he admitted. "Hired by who?" the detective asked. "A woman named Margaret Louise Miller." My ears rang. My mother-in-law. My hands went numb. "Why would she hire you?" the detective continued. Hartman swallowed. "To document Catherine Miller's daily life," he said. "To assess parenting, whether the child is being neglected because the mother works too much." I stood up so fast my chair scraped the floor. "What does that even mean?" I snapped. Hartman looked down. "She believed the mother was unfit. She wanted evidence for a custody petition." Custody. For my daughter. From me. Because I work. Because I'm tired. Because my husband died and I didn't fall apart politely enough. Mike stared like he'd been punched. "No," he said. "No, my mom wouldn't." The detective's eyes went sharp. Mr. Miller, he said. You've been at Ms. Miller's home often. You've asked about schedules, school events, plans. Mike opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. I was worried, he said finally, about my sister-in-law and my niece. Worried about what? The detective asked. Mike froze, and then Abby spoke. Soft. Clear. I saw that man at Grandma Maggie's house, Abby said. The room went still. The detective turned gently. When, Abby? 2 weeks ago, she said. When I visited. He was talking to her. Hartman flinched. Because children don't lie when they're not trying to protect anyone. The detective asked Hartman how many times he'd met Margaret. 3, Hartman admitted. Initial instructions, then an update, then more instructions. What additional instructions? The detective asked. More photos, Hartman said. Try to record conversations. Find out if Catherine has habits, connections, anything compromising. My stomach turned. Our lives, our grocery runs, our school pickups, my late shifts, Abby's blue dress, all filed away like evidence. Then the detective brought in a folder. Inside were dozens of photos. Me and Abby at the park, me picking her up after school, me carrying groceries, me laughing with her on a bench like I didn't know I was being watched. There were printouts of my social media tags, copies of my work schedules pulled from somewhere in the hospital system where someone shouldn't have been pulling them, and then the worst part, a typed plan, a checklist of how to make me look like a negligent mother, overworked, emotionally unstable after grief, frequently absent, lack of supervision. There was also a neat little section on Margaret, stable income, a paid-off condo, a clean, structured environment. Deep interest in the child's education. Like parenting was a resume contest. Mike stared at the pages, shaking. My mom. She was really going to do this, he whispered. Was she using me? The detective didn't answer for him. Mike looked at me, desperate. Kate, he said, voice breaking. I swear I didn't know. I wanted to believe him. I also wanted to throw him out of my life like a burning object. Both feelings existed at the same time. Because grief makes your heart messy. Margaret came to the station the next day. She cried immediately, the kind of crying that arrives on purpose. My Abby, she sobbed. She's all I have left of David. She looked at me like I was a temporary obstacle, like I was young and replaceable. Catherine works so much, she said, wiping her face. It's too hard for her alone. I could give Abby a better life, more attention. The detective's voice stayed flat. You understand you can't remove a child from a fit parent because you disagree with her schedule. Margaret's lips trembled. I didn't have a choice, she whispered. Abby is my only hope. No, she had choices. She chose control. That's what people never admit. They call it love because it sounds nicer. The fallout moved fast after that. A judge signed a temporary protective order. Margaret wasn't allowed to contact Abby directly. Any visitation had to be supervised. No pop-ins. No, just checking. No surprise appearances at school. CPS came by once, because of course they did. A caseworker looked at my kitchen, Abby's room, her clean backpack, her homework folder, and my hospital ID badge still clipped to my lanyard like a scar. She asked Abby if she felt safe. Abby said yes. Then she asked if anyone made her feel unsafe. Abby said quietly, Grandma Maggie. That was enough. Margaret left town soon after, went to stay with her sister in another state, to recover. Because even villains need rest, apparently. Hartman faced charges, And suddenly, his confidential investigation didn't sound so official anymore. A week later, Mike came to our door. This time he didn't show up like he owned the place. He rang once, then waited. When I opened the door, he looked like a man who'd aged a year in 7 days. "Kate," he said quietly, "can we talk?" We sat in the living room. Abby did homework in her room, the way kids do when they're listening anyway. Mike stared at his hands. "I didn't know," he said again. "I swear, I thought my mom was just worried. She asked questions and I answered. I didn't think." I leaned back. "So you fed her information," I said, calm because I had no energy left for loud. Mike nodded. "Yes." He swallowed hard. "She kept saying I was the only man left in the family," he admitted. "That I should be your support. That David would have wanted it." I flinched at David's name again, like it still had teeth. Mike hesitated, then added, barely audible, "And that wasn't all." I waited. He looked up, eyes red. "I always liked you." The words landed heavy. "Even when David was alive," he said quickly, like confessing faster would make it less awful. "I never acted on it. Never would have. But after he died, I cared. Too much. And my mom, she used that. She knew I'd show up. She knew I'd try to help." He laughed once, bitter. "I was stupid." Abby appeared in the doorway then, like she'd been summoned. "Are you talking?" she asked. Mike dropped to his knees in front of her. "I'm sorry," he said, voice breaking. "I'm sorry you were scared because of me." Abby studied him for a long moment. Then she said, serious and simple, "You're not bad. Grandma Maggie tricked you." Mike's face crumpled. "That doesn't excuse me," he whispered. Abby walked over and took his hand. "But if you weren't around," she said softly, "maybe it would have been worse, because then we wouldn't have noticed something was wrong." I turned away so they wouldn't see my eyes, because sometimes an 8-year-old says something wise enough to break you. Mike didn't become family again overnight. He earned his way back like someone rebuilding a house after a fire. Slow, careful, no sudden movements. He stopped asking where we were going. He stopped trying to check things. He just showed up when asked, fixing a leaky faucet, picking Abby up from school if I got held late at the hospital, helping me drive out to the old lake cabin David loved so I could keep the little garden patch alive, because it felt wrong to let it die too. He told Abby stories about David as a kid, not to replace him, to keep him real. Abby listened like those stories were oxygen. Some nights, Mike and I sat at the kitchen table with tea and silence. Not romantic. Not yet. Just human. I started seeing him as a person, not just a role. Not my husband's brother. Not Margaret's son. Just Mike. And that made all the difference. 1 year later, spring came with lilacs and the kind of soft air that feels like permission to breathe again. Mike and I got married quietly. No spectacle, no performance. Abby wore a white dress and scattered flower petals down the aisle, beaming like she was carrying sunlight. After the ceremony, she hugged me tight. "Mom," she asked, voice small, "are you happy?" I kissed the top of her head. "I am," I said, "because of you." She looked up at the sky. "Do you think Dad can see us?" My throat tightened. It still did, even after time. "Yes," I said. "I think he can. And I think he'd want us safe." Mike lifted Abby into his arms. "I'm not here to erase your dad," he told her gently. "We'll remember him. Always." Abby wrapped her arms around his neck. "I love Dad Mike," she declared, then added, just as firm, "and I love Dad David." And somehow, that made room in my chest for peace. Somewhere else, another city, another window, Margaret probably still stared out and called it heartbreak. Maybe it was. But heartbreak doesn't give you permission to hunt a child. We didn't cut her off entirely. Months later, after court reviews, contact was limited to supervised calls, brief, structured, and on our terms. She could call Abby, supervised, brief, structured. Boundaries she hated, until she finally learned them. And me? I learned something too. Love that demands control isn't love. It's ownership. So tell me, have you ever had someone claim they were just worried while tightening their grip around your life? How do you tell the difference between care and control? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. If this story hooked you, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. See you in the next video.
Hi, I've got a brand new story for you. This one is a bit different because the protagonist is the only child, but her parents do something really, really bad and regret it. Let's listen.
When I returned home from a work trip, my 8-year-old was with a foster family. "It's better this way," my mom said casually. Before that, they begged me to go because they needed the money. 9 days later, they regretted everything when I was in a hotel conference room 3 states over when I tried to call Caroline on Wednesday night, and my mother answered instead. She said Caroline was in the bath, said it lightly, then asked how my meetings were going as if that should settle it. I told her I only had 10 minutes before the next session and wanted to hear my daughter's voice. My mother laughed and said, "She's splashing everywhere. Call later." I called again after dinner. This time my father picked up and told me Caroline had gone to sleep early. "She never goes down this early on a school night," I said. He told me not to turn everything into a problem. Then he added, "We've got her." I stood in the hallway outside the ballroom staring at a terrible floral carpet while the line went dead in my hand. On paper, nothing had happened. My daughter was with my parents, the people who had pushed me to take the trip in the first place. But something about the speed of their answers and how completely they kept me away from her voice started needling at me. It was a small thing. It did not feel small. By Thursday morning, I had started timing my breaks around Caroline's schedule the way I always did when I traveled, and every call ended the same way. She was outside. She was playing. She was helping Grandma cook. She was in the shower now. "Call later." I texted, "Tell her I love her. Tell her I'll be home tomorrow." My mother sent back a thumbs up and nothing else. At lunch, I stepped out of a client meeting and called again. My father answered before the second ring, which told me he had been watching the phone. "You need to focus on work," he said. I reminded him they were the ones who had insisted I go because the extra pay would help all of us. He ignored that and said Caroline was doing great. When I asked him to put her on anyway, he said she had gone outside with chalk and bubbles and could not come in right now. I almost told him to walk out and get her, but my manager was waiting for me back inside, and I had no proof, only dread. So I did what people do when something is wrong but not yet provable. I swallowed it, went back into the meeting, and worked through the day on a lie. By Friday afternoon, I had one clean shirt left, sore feet, and a little plush fox in my tote bag that I had bought at the airport because Caroline loved naming stuffed animals before she even hugged them properly. The drive from the airport to my parents' house ran on one bright thought. In a minute, she would hear the door, come charging down the hall, and ask me 6 questions before I got my shoes off. When I let myself in with my key, the house looked normal in the worst possible way. My mother and father were in the kitchen talking about a celebrity divorce. Dinner smelled half-started. A mug of tea sat cold by the sink. My father looked up and said, "You're back," like I had returned from the pharmacy. I dropped my bag by the door and smiled automatically because home had a script and my body still knew it. "Where's Caroline?" I asked. My mother put down the spoon she was using. My father stopped moving. Nothing dramatic happened. Nobody gasped. The air simply changed. And in that one strange, quiet second, I knew I was not about to hear anything ordinary. My mother wiped her hands on a dish towel and said, too carefully, "Okay, we need to talk about that." Every part of me went cold. "What happened?" I asked. She told me to sit down. I didn't move. "Where is she?" My father stepped in with the same infuriating calm. "Hannah, just sit so we can explain this properly." I heard my own voice sharpen. "No, you explain it standing up." My mother said, "She's safe." And that one word hit so hard I had to grab the back of a chair. Safe meant something had already gone wrong. Safe meant I was late. I started asking faster. Was she hurt? Sick? At the hospital? Why were they talking like this? My father kept saying, "Nothing like that," without offering the one answer that mattered. When I demanded again to know where my daughter was, my mother glanced at my father first. That look did it. This was not panic. This was a plan. They had already had this conversation with each other. They had already decided what they were going to say to me. By then, my legs were shaking enough that sitting down felt less like obedience and more like staying upright long enough to hear the damage. Once I sat, my mother took the chair across from me, and my father stayed by the counter with his arms folded like some neutral witness. Then my mother said, "We've been thinking for a while that you aren't managing very well." I actually stared at her for a second because the sentence was so absurd next to the fact that my daughter was missing from the house. She kept going anyway. "I worked too much. I was stretched too thin. Caroline needed more stability than this." "You begged me to take this trip," I said. My father cut in at once. "That isn't the point." "Then what was the point?" I asked, because my child was clearly not in the next room, and they were speaking like this was a family budget meeting. My mother lifted her chin. "We did what we thought was best." I asked again where Caroline was. My father said, "With a nice family." For a second, my brain refused to put those words in any order that made sense. "What family?" I asked. He repeated it, slower this time, as if I were the problem. "A nice family." My mother leaned back and said, "It's better this way." That was when the floor of my life dropped out from under me. At first, they would not say foster family outright. They kept hiding behind softer words. A placement. A home. People experienced with children. I talked over every one of them. Who authorized this? What did you tell them? Where did you take her? My mother finally lost patience and said they had told the agency that I was away, that I had left Caroline in their care, that there was no clear written return plan, that they could not reliably reach me, and that they were no longer willing to keep her because the situation had become unstable. "I was gone for 4 days," I said. My father shrugged. "You weren't here." That was the moment the whole thing snapped into focus. They had pushed me to take the trip. They had promised they wanted the time with her. Then while I was gone, while I was calling and being told she was in the bath or asleep or busy, they had taken my daughter to child welfare and painted some version of me as absent enough to lose her. "You told them I abandoned her?" I asked. Neither of them answered directly, which told me everything. My mother only said, She's being looked after. I stood so fast the chair scraped across the floor. Whatever excuses came next were useless. I did not need their motives. I needed a name, an address, and a way to get to my child. I demanded the agency information, and my father tried one last time to control the pace. "You are not going to storm in there and make this worse." I grabbed my bag and said, "You already did that." My mother followed me into the hall talking about procedures now, about how I needed to calm down and be sensible. I turned around and told her I would call every child welfare office in the county until I found Caroline. That ended the performance. My father gave me the agency name. My mother gave me the caseworker's name, Dana, and added, "They won't let you just take her." I looked at my mother then and understood something with awful clarity. She had expected the hardest part to be over by the time I came home. She had expected me to cry, argue, maybe collapse. She had not expected me to move. I got the address, walked out before they could stack more careful words on top of what they had done, and locked myself in my car. My hands shook so badly I missed the ignition twice. Then I got the key in, took one short breath, and drove straight to the agency. On the drive there, my mind kept pulling up old memories as if it had been waiting years for me to finally read them correctly. I was an only child, and with my parents, warmth had always come in bursts strong enough to make you doubt your own history. My mother would suddenly decide we were all getting ice cream in the rain, and for that hour she was funny, easy, delighted by me. My father would kneel on the carpet and help me with a puzzle like he had nowhere else to be. In those moments, I felt chosen. Then the weather changed. A bedroom door would close. Their voices would go quiet behind it. I would stand in the hallway with a drawing or a question and understand, without anyone saying so, that I was in the way now. No one teaches a child that attention can disappear. The house teaches her. By the time I was old enough to name inconsistency, I had already learned to adapt to it. Sitting behind that wheel, heading to the agency where my daughter was because of them, I realized I had spent half my life translating cruelty into mood. This time I wasn't going to translate anything for them. That was the rhythm of my childhood, and because it was the only rhythm I knew, I got very good at managing myself around their moods. One week they would ask about school, promise to come to something, act proud in front of other people. The next week they would forget, get tired, or drift into plans of their own and act surprised that I felt dropped. By middle school, I could read the set of my father's jaw before I asked for anything. I could hear from my mother's footsteps whether she was in one of her bright phases or whether I should make myself smaller for the night. That kind of training follows you into adulthood. It teaches you to treat brief kindness like evidence and to call instability normal because admitting otherwise would require rebuilding the whole map. So when they later sounded attentive and generous and deeply invested in Caroline, some old part of me wanted to believe I was finally getting the family I had always been told existed. The problem with intermittent affection is that it makes people work harder, not walk away. I could see that clearly now, and I hated how late the clarity had come. By the time Caroline was 3, I was already doing most things alone. Adam, my ex and her father, had left for what he called a better life with another woman in another state, and for a while he treated fatherhood like a subscription he could pause without canceling. He called at first. He sent voice messages. He promised weekends, then holidays, then soon. A missed visit became an apology. A missed birthday became flowers with the wrong cartoon character on the card. Then the gaps got longer, and the explanations got thinner. Caroline used to stand by the window when any car door slammed outside. After a while, she stopped doing even that. The worst part was how quietly she adjusted. One day I realized she had not asked about him in weeks, and that was somehow harder than all the earlier crying. Children edit their own expectations faster than adults do. They do it to survive. That history mattered because what happened later was never landing on a blank slate. Caroline had already been left once by the man who was supposed to stay. When my parents tore through the little trust she still had in family, they were not creating a first wound. They were digging into one that had never fully closed. Then my parents entered one of their good phases and played it so convincingly I let them back into the middle of our lives. They were attentive again, generous again, saying exactly the things I had wanted to hear for years. My mother said I should not be carrying everything alone. My father said they wanted to help for once instead of just watching me struggle. They suggested Caroline and I move back in for a while so I could save money, work steadier hours, and have childcare I could trust. I knew who they were. I knew they could turn without warning. But life as a single mother doesn't leave much room for perfect decisions, only workable ones. So I said yes. For a while it even felt easy. Caroline played card games with them on the living room rug, brought them drawings, and fit herself into their orbit the way children do when adults are warm enough to feel safe. My mother bought her little craft kits. My father let her help in the garden and pretended not to notice when she drowned the tomato plants. Watching them together stirred up the oldest hope in me. I told myself age had softened them. I told myself grandparents were different. I told myself safe enough was safe. The warning signs never disappeared. They just wore ordinary clothes. One afternoon I had a work event across town, and my parents insisted there was nothing to worry about, because of course they would pick Caroline up from school. My mother was almost offended that I repeated the time. At 3:28 my phone started buzzing during a presentation. It was the school office. No one had come for Caroline. I still remember the cold that moved through my body when the secretary said my daughter was sitting with her backpack on, trying hard not to cry. I left mid-sentence, drove there with both hands welded to the wheel, and found Caroline in a plastic chair by the window, swinging one sneaker slowly because she was working so hard to look brave. In the car she said, "Grandma forgot, but it's okay," in that careful voice children use when they are already protecting the adults who failed them. That night I confronted my parents. My father said they had lost track of time. My mother said I was making it bigger than it was. That should have ended the arrangement. Instead, I treated it like a warning I could manage. I told myself forgetting was different from harm. I was wrong about that too. So when the work trip came up, my first instinct was no. It was only Monday through Friday and the extra pay would help, but I no longer trusted anyone who had already proven they could forget my child in the shape of an afternoon. I mentioned the trip mostly to explain why I might turn it down. My parents lit up immediately. My mother said they would love the time with Caroline. My father said the money mattered and I would be foolish to pass it up. Then they did the part I can still hear perfectly. They sold it to Caroline right in front of me. Pancakes for dinner. A movie night. Frozen yogurt after school. Caroline's face changed with each promise. Turning the trip down in that moment would not just have disappointed them, it would have crushed her too. So I let myself believe this was one of their good phases again. Monday and Tuesday sounded normal. Wednesday they stopped letting me talk to her. By Wednesday afternoon they had taken her to child welfare and handed her over. They still answered my calls after that. They just answered them themselves. I landed Friday evening with a stuffed fox in my bag and walked into the life they had already detonated. The agency sat in a low beige building beside a strip mall, which felt obscene because places where lives get split open should not be allowed to share a parking lot with a sandwich shop. I parked badly, grabbed my bag, and almost ran inside. The lobby smelled like toner and old coffee. A receptionist behind glass asked whether I had an appointment. I said I needed Dana immediately because my parents had taken my daughter there while I was away for work and placed her with strangers. Saying it aloud made people start moving. The receptionist disappeared through a side door. I stood there with my overnight tote still on my shoulder and Caroline's plush fox pressing against my wallet inside it. When Dana came out, she was younger than I expected, practical looking, badge clipped to a cardigan, already wearing the careful expression of someone stepping into a mess. "I'm Dana," she said. "Come with me." She led me into a small office and motioned toward a chair. I stayed standing. "I'm Hannah," I said. "I landed less than 2 hours ago and came here as soon as I found out what they'd done. I'm Caroline's mother. I'm here, and I need to see my daughter now." Dana's face changed slightly at the word airport. It was the first crack in the story my parents had built. Dana asked me to slow down, but panic does not slow down because someone says please. I kept asking the same questions in different forms. Was Caroline okay? Had she been crying? Did she know I was back? Where was she? Could I go there? Could someone bring her in? Dana answered carefully. Caroline was safe. She was in a licensed foster placement. She had a bed, food, and clothing. "That is not what I asked," I said. Then I saw the phrase temporary abandonment concern, after hours emergency intake, clipped to the top page of the file on her desk. "That report is false," I told her. "My parents pushed me to take a 4-day work trip. I have been calling every day. They would not let me speak to her." Dana asked for dates, return time, whether there had been a written childcare plan. I answered all of it in a rush and shoved my phone across the desk with texts from my mother saying, "We've got her and stop worrying. Enjoy your meetings." Dana did not tell me she believed me, but she stopped treating the folder like the story was settled and started reading it like it might fall apart under scrutiny. I asked again to see my daughter. Dana took a breath, and I knew before she spoke that the answer was still going to hurt. "Not tonight," Dana said. The words were flat enough that they took a second to land. She said she could not authorize immediate removal or contact until intake was reviewed and circumstances were confirmed. I asked what that meant when I was standing right in front of her with ID in my wallet and a return boarding pass in my bag. Dana said she understood I was upset. I told her not to say upset like this was a ruined dinner plan. "Come back tomorrow," she said. "I'll do what I can to arrange a visit." "Not I will. I'll try." I asked whether Caroline had been crying for me. Dana paused, then said only, "She's had a confusing day." That answer was almost worse than the no. I walked out into the cold parking lot and understood there was no version of this night where I went back to my parents' house and slept under their roof. I booked the nearest hotel from my car. My mother called while the confirmation loaded. I watched her name flash across the screen, let it ring out, then blocked both of my parents before I put the phone down. There were explanations I would never need to hear. The only thing left to do was build the record they thought I wouldn't have. The hotel was 5 minutes away. I checked in, locked the door, gave myself 3 minutes to cry, and then sat on the bed and started collecting proof. I pulled up every text about the trip. "Go," my father had written. "We need the money too, and Caroline will love the extra time with us." My mother had sent a cheerful packing list for our fun week. I screenshotted all of it. Then I saved my call history showing every attempt to reach Caroline, every short conversation where one of them had intercepted me, every unanswered callback. I added work emails with the trip dates, my boarding pass, my hotel receipt, and the itinerary showing I had landed less than 2 hours before walking into the agency. Around midnight, my friend Megan called back after seeing my missed call. I told her, "They gave Caroline to foster care." She did not waste a second on disbelief. "Save everything," she said. "Then send it to yourself twice." I sat there in a room that smelled like bleach and bad air freshener, building a timeline while the ice machine rattled down the hall. The night stopped being only panic. It became evidence. I slept in scraps and woke before sunrise with my phone in my hand and a list of lawyers on the hotel notepad. By 7:30, I had messages out to 3 attorneys. Ms. Campbell called back first. She was concise, unsentimental, and exactly what I needed. "Email me the screenshots and a clean timeline," she said. "Do not contact your parents. Document everything." I sent the file to Ms. Campbell from the parking lot, then forwarded the same packet to Dana at the address the agency had given me the night before. 10 minutes later, I walked back into the agency and asked for Dana again. This time, she took me to a conference room instead of intake. My screenshots were already printed on the table. Dana had flagged the intake for first thing review, and her supervisor had already gone through the overnight file. Dana pointed to the texts where my parents urged me to take the trip, the call log showing repeated attempts to reach Caroline, and my flight confirmation showing I had returned exactly when I said I would. None of it fit abandonment. None of it fit refusal to care. She said my evidence substantially changed the picture and that she could authorize a supervised visit that afternoon while they reviewed next steps. I sat down for the first time since the night before. Then I stopped shaking. I got very calm. The visit room had a couch, a plastic bin of toys, and a mural of trees someone had probably meant to make comforting. Dana opened the door and Caroline was already moving before I got inside. She hit me around the waist, hard, both arms locked, face buried in my jacket like she was bracing against weather. I dropped to my knees and held her just as hard. She felt warm and real and wrong in clothes that were not ours. I kept saying, "I'm here, I'm here," because it was the only sentence that mattered. She pulled back long enough to study my face, then climbed into my lap even though she had outgrown that years ago. She asked where I had been. I said, "Work, and I came back as fast as I could." She asked why Grandma and Grandpa had taken her somewhere else. I told her adults had made a bad decision and none of it was because of her. Then she looked past me at the painted trees and asked, in a small voice, "Is there something wrong with me? Because Daddy left, and then you left, and then they left me too." That was the question that ended my panic and turned it into purpose. "No," I told her, "there is something wrong with what they did." The next few days were not dramatic in a movie way. They were calls, forms, meetings, and the steady collapse of the story my parents had tried to build. Ms. Campbell filed responses and told me exactly what not to say. Dana asked for more documents, and I kept producing them. Megan brought coffee, chargers, and the kind of company that does not ask you to perform strength. By Tuesday afternoon, after several more days of calls, forms, and meetings, Caroline was released back to me while the case itself stayed open. When Dana brought her out with a trash bag of spare clothes and school papers, Caroline ran to me again with that same desperate force, but this time I was allowed to walk out holding her hand. In the hotel that night, she would not let me close the bathroom door. She followed me from bed to sink to window like proximity itself could keep me from disappearing again. When I turned off the lamp, she asked, "You'll still be here in the morning, right?" I said yes. 10 minutes later, she asked again. I answered every time. Proof did not fix the damage. Being right did not fix it either. But at least by then we were back on the same side of the locked door, and that was the first real step home. Getting Caroline back settled one thing immediately. We were never going back to my parents' house. Not for a night, not to save money, not for any reason that could be dressed up as practical. Ms. Campbell agreed before I finished the sentence. "Separate address," she said, "as fast as possible." So I spent 2 days doing apartment applications from a hotel desk while Caroline colored beside me and checked every so often that my purse was still in the room, as if bags could guarantee mothers. I found a small 2-bedroom available right away and signed without pretending it was perfect. Then I went to the school and removed my parents from every pickup list, emergency contact field, and authorized access note. The secretary frowned at her screen and said, "Your mother called this morning asking whether Caroline would be back Monday." That told me they were already trying to reach us through the school, and later I realized the forwarding notice that had gone to the old house before I finished changing everything over was probably how they got our new address. I did not raise my voice. I only said, "She is not authorized for any information." After that, Megan drove me to my parents' house so I could collect our things, while she waited in the car with Caroline, who sat with a juice box and her tablet. I packed clothes, medications, school papers, her blanket, and left my key on the counter with one line for them. Contact goes through Ms. Campbell. Nothing else was owed. For the next couple of days after that, my parents stayed silent, and the silence let Caroline and me learn the new apartment in peace. We ate macaroni on the floor because the table had not arrived yet. We made a rule that no door in our home got slammed hard enough to make either of us flinch. Then, 9 days after I came back from the trip, the buzzer rang during Sunday lunch. I looked through the peephole and saw my parents standing there with bakery boxes in their hands, dressed like this was a cheerful family visit. I opened the inner door and left the chain on. My mother smiled too brightly. "We brought Caroline those cinnamon rolls she likes." My father said, "Maybe we could take her to the zoo for a couple hours. Give you a break." For 1 second, I just looked at them, because some kinds of audacity deserve a proper witness. Then I said, "No!" My mother's smile tightened. "Hannah, don't be childish." Behind me, the apartment had gone completely silent, which meant Caroline was listening. That silence made the next part easy. I stepped into the hallway, pulled the door nearly shut behind me, and prepared to say the last polite thing they were ever going to get from me. In the hallway, my parents started minimizing before I had finished closing the door. Looking after a child full-time for a few days had been harder than expected, my mother said. My father said I should never have dumped that responsibility on them. I reminded them that they had asked for it repeatedly in writing, and my mother flinched. Then they began talking over each other, sanding down the truth. It was not as if they had hurt her, my father said. Foster care had only been temporary, my mother added. You are acting like we committed a crime. I let that sit. Then I said evenly, You lied to take my child out of my care. You told strangers I had abandoned her when you had my travel dates, my calls, and my return time. Neither of them had an answer, so they reached for outrage instead. It had nowhere to land. I told them they would never again have unsupervised access to Caroline, never again be on a pickup list, and never again be considered safe caregivers. You made a choice, I said. These are the consequences. The cease and desist went out that Monday, along with notices to the school, aftercare, pediatric office, and apartment manager. From then on, their version of events had no place left to hide. The case closed slowly, but it closed in our favor because the proof never changed. The texts were still there. The call logs were still there. Dana's notes reflected the revised timeline, and Ms. Campbell made sure every agency and school record matched reality instead of my parents' story. Much later, once Caroline was back in a steadier place and I could think without shaking, I gave a formal statement and agreed to cooperate with the case over the false statements they had made about me abandoning her. They ended up with criminal records, which shocked exactly 2 people. By then, Caroline was healing in the ordinary, uneven way children heal. More clingy than before, more sensitive, still checking rooms at bedtime, still wanting me to answer twice when she asked whether I'd be there in the morning. But she laughed more in our apartment than she ever had in my parents' house. Maybe that was because nothing in our home changed without warning. No closed doors meant to shut someone out. No moods that ruled the weather. Just dinner, homework, bath, story, bed. Quiet can feel extravagant when chaos used to call itself family. I cut my parents off completely, and I have never regretted protecting her. Tell me honestly, would you have let them back in? Did I do the right thing by cutting them off completely? Or should I have still allowed some contact? Let me know in the comments and subscribe for more.
Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed the story. Let me know what you thought in the comments. I also started narrating my own stories on a different channel, so feel free to check it out. There should be a link somewhere on the screen or in the description.
My family took my 7-year-old to a fake therapist who told her no one could love a girl like you. It's for your own good, my parents said. My daughter came home asking if I still loved her. I didn't cry. I did this. The next day, their lives started to unravel. It started like any other quiet night. My husband David was on the couch, reading the paper with his glasses low on his nose. The TV hummed softly in the background, some show we weren't really watching. I was rinsing plates, humming without thinking. Our daughter, Ellie, sat cross-legged on the rug, drawing with a pile of markers and that focus only kids have. Everything ordinary. Then she said, "Mom, do you love me?" I laughed, automatic. What kind of question is that? Of course I do. She kept coloring. Okay, she said, almost like she was checking off a box. I went back to loading the dishwasher, thinking that was that. 7-year-olds ask random things all the time. But then, after a minute, would you still love me if I was bad? Something about her tone, smaller, careful, made me look over. Bad how? She didn't look up. She pressed the marker harder, outlining the same shape over and over until the paper started to tear. Like if I wasn't a good girl. If I was wrong inside, I turned off the faucet. Ellie. She glanced up, quick, like she'd been caught doing something shameful. Her eyes were shiny. I just wondered. The air changed. I walked over, knelt beside her. Hey, where's this coming from? She shook her head. Nowhere. Sweetheart, talk to me. Her lip wobbled. Sometimes people love you and then they don't. The lady said that happens when you don't try hard enough to be good. I felt a drop of water run from my hand to her drawing, spreading the marker line into a smear. What lady? She blinked fast, like she regretted saying it. Grandma's friend. The feelings lady. She helps me be better so people won't stop. Wait. What do you mean, she helps you? She talks to me. About how to make Grace feel happy, about how not to brag or laugh too loud. She says when I talk too much, people think I'm showing off. I heard David close his book behind me. What lady? He asked quietly. Ellie kept her eyes down. She's nice. She has toys in her office. She said Grandma brings kids who need help being loved again. Grandma took you? My voice cracked. Ellie nodded. And Aunt Vanessa. They said it's for my own good. I stood up too fast. The room tilted. When? Last weekend. And before that one time when you were at work, I walked to her backpack, heart pounding. She followed me with her eyes but didn't move. Inside, tucked in a side pocket, was a pastel business card. Cheryl Patterson, Child Confidence Coach, Serene Growth Wellness. Serene Growth. Vanessa's business. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number. A voicemail answered in a sing-song voice. Hi, this is Cheryl with Serene Growth Wellness, helping little ones shine with humility. I hung up. My hands were shaking. Mom? Ellie said softly. I looked at her. Her drawing now showed two girls, her and Grace, holding hands. Over them she'd written, "Be small so they love you." My throat closed. Where did you hear that? The lady says I should practice being small. She says it helps people keep loving me. I sat down beside her. Ellie, you don't ever have to be small for anyone. Not for me, not for Grandma, not for anyone. She studied me, uncertain, like she didn't know if I was telling the truth. But what if I don't change? What if they stop? They won't, I said, even though my voice came out rough. And if they do, then that's their problem. She hesitated. Maybe they're right, though. Maybe I'm not a good girl. And that's when she started crying. Not loud, just tears sliding down her face, silent and fast. I pulled her against me, feeling her small body shake. You're good. You're kind. You're perfect exactly as you are. David came over and crouched beside us. He put his hand on Ellie's back and looked at me like he was afraid to speak. I wiped her cheeks. You never have to see that woman again, okay? I promise. She nodded, but she still looked scared. I stood, grabbed my laptop, opened my banking app. There it was. SG Wellness, $320, $450, $280. Payments I hadn't made. I clicked dispute. My fingers trembled on the keys. David asked, What's going on? They've been taking her there, I said. Vanessa, Mom and Dad, paying that woman with my card. He stared at me. What? She's been telling our daughter no one could love her. The words sounded foreign in my own mouth, like something that couldn't be real. Ellie sniffled, still pressed against my side. Grandma said you'd say that because you have to. I looked down at her, those wet lashes, that small face still waiting for an answer. No, I said quietly. I say it because it's true. She clung to me, her fingers curling into my shirt. David put a hand on my shoulder. What do we do? I looked at the pastel business card on the table, the neat letters spelling out Serene Growth Wellness. The pink edges were soft, almost pretty. I wanted to tear it in half. We end it, I said. And I meant all of it. The sessions, the secrets, the years of letting them decide who got to shine and who didn't. I held Ellie tighter. Her breathing slowed against me. In my head, the voicemail replayed, syrupy and bright, helping little ones shine with humility. They'd told my daughter she was unlovable. I pressed the card flat on the counter, the print smearing under my thumb. Then, I said, mostly to myself, we'll show her they were wrong. People like to say money changes a family. That's not true. It just shows you what they already were. I was the oldest, the reliable one. Vanessa was the golden child, the one who lit up a room. Dad said she was born to shine. I was built to make things work. It sounded like praise until I realized I was the maintenance crew for her spotlight. Growing up, she could burn dinner, skip curfew, flunk an exam, and it became a cute story. If I did anything wrong, it was a disappointment. When she failed out of community college, Mom said, "Vanessa's just creative." The world doesn't understand her kind. When I worked 2 jobs through mine, Dad said, "Tara's a bit rigid. She likes control." That was the pattern. I worked. She charmed. I built something steady. She borrowed it. By 30, I was the one with the house, the steady job in tech, the credit score people brag about. Vanessa had dreams and debt, and somehow I was the one expected to keep the peace. It started small. A phone bill 1 month, a car payment the next. Then Mom needed a new water heater, and I paid that too. David warned me. "You're not buying peace," he said once. "You're renting it." He was right, of course, but peace, even temporary, felt worth something back then. Then Vanessa launched Serene Growth Wellness, a boutique/wellness center/yoga studio/whatever. She called it a place for people to feel better. I called it a financial sinkhole. She needed startup money. "Just a small loan," she said. $40,000 later, I had a handwritten contract and a promise she'd pay me back as soon as the business takes off. It never took off. But every time I looked at her, I saw the little sister I used to walk home from school, clutching my hand. So I let it go. Then came the girls. Ellie was born first. 6 months later, Grace arrived, Vanessa's daughter. At first, I thought it would be sweet. 2 cousins, growing up like sisters. It wasn't. Every compliment Ellie got became a criticism of Grace. "She's so confident," someone would say, and Vanessa would smile tight. Yes, she does love attention. If Ellie sang, Grace was overwhelmed. If Ellie won, Grace was discouraged. And my parents backed her up every time. "Don't rub it in, Tara," Mom said once when Ellie showed her an art ribbon. "Grace is sensitive." As if my 7-year-old had a PR problem. Looking back now, I can see the cracks forming, the resentment under all those polite smiles. I should have seen what was coming, but I didn't. I was too busy trying to be the good daughter, the calm one, the bridge. Vanessa came to me one afternoon with that bright, brittle grin of hers. "You know what would be perfect for Ellie and Grace?" she said. "Confidence coaching." My friend Cheryl just joined Serene Growth. She works with kids, helps them balance each other out. "Balance each other out," I repeated. "They're 7, Vanessa, not rivals." "It's not rivalry," she said. "It's emotional alignment." Cheryl's amazing. It sounded harmless. Play therapy, art projects, and it was family. What could go wrong? I said yes. Of course I said yes. I was still helping, still paying. I even handed her my card again. "Use this for the sessions," I told her. "Or supplies." Whatever I didn't know, that card was already the lifeline keeping her business afloat. Cheryl wasn't a therapist. She was a friend trying to get a wellness certification who needed clients to practice on. Vanessa called it mentoring. In reality, it was an experiment, and Ellie was the subject. When I saw the charges later, SG Wellness, neat little numbers stacked one after another, I thought they were for yoga classes or aromatherapy gifts for my parents. They'd been there for months, buried between mortgage transfers and groceries. The moment I realized what they really were, it felt like my stomach dropped straight through the floor. Every swipe, every quiet little payment I'd approved without thinking had bought another hour of someone teaching my daughter to hate herself. I could picture it now. Vanessa in her office, smiling for clients, while Cheryl told Ellie to Practice being small. My parents probably sipping tea in the next room, proud of themselves for helping. And me? I was footing the bill. It wasn't 3 charges. It was dozens. Each one a reminder that I'd paid for my own child's undoing. I can still picture the first time Ellie changed. It wasn't dramatic. She just quieted. She stopped humming when she drew. She'd finish a picture and then ask, "Is it okay? Is it too much?" She started saying sorry before anything. Sorry for singing. Sorry for asking. Sorry for being. When I mentioned it to Mom, she smiled. "It's maturity, Tara." She's learning to be thoughtful, Vanessa called it progress. And I wanted to believe them, because believing them was easier than admitting I'd handed them the match that lit the fire. David tried to bring it up once, gently. "She's been different," he said. "Quieter." "She's growing up," I told him. "Kids go through phases." But even as I said it, I knew I was lying to both of us. Then the art ribbons stopped. The singing stopped. And that night, when she asked me if I still loved her, it all finally made sense. They hadn't been teaching her humility. They'd been teaching her to disappear. The morning after everything came out, I woke up already angry. Not shouting angry, steady angry. The kind that burns clean. By 8 a.m., I'd made coffee, opened my laptop, and started deleting things. Every transfer, every automatic payment, every quiet little thread they'd tied between my account and theirs. Mortgage help. The family fund. The monthly wellness membership for Mom. Gone. All of it. It felt weirdly satisfying, like spring cleaning but for betrayal. David leaned on the doorframe, watching. "You sure?" I hit confirm and said, "For the first time, yeah." Then I opened my bank's dispute page and flagged every charge from SG Wellness. "Unauthorized activity," I typed. "Services obtained without consent." It felt almost too easy, like pressing undo on a decade of bad habits. When I was done, I texted Vanessa one sentence. "Ellie won't be going to those sessions again, and you'll get nothing more from me." I put my phone face down and didn't check it for hours, partly out of principle, partly because I didn't trust myself not to throw it at a wall. At noon, I took Ellie to a real therapist. A woman with framed degrees, not motivational posters about vibrations. Ellie sat on the couch, twisting her sleeve. The therapist spoke softly to her, asked about the lady from before. Ellie said little, but when she did, her voice shook. Afterward, the therapist pulled me aside. "She's been told that being herself hurts people," she said. "That's not coaching. That's harm." It took everything I had not to cry right there. "She's 7, I said. "I know," the therapist replied. "But she'll recover, with the right protection." Protection? I could do that. And for once, doing something didn't mean paying someone else to make things worse. That night, I sat at the kitchen table printing things. Statements, screenshots, receipts. The name Serene Growth Wellness repeated down the page like a taunt. When I clicked on Vanessa's website, Cheryl's face smiled back at me. "Certified Child Growth Specialist," it said in pretty script. Underneath was a testimonial signed with my name. My daughter Ellie absolutely loves her sessions with Cheryl. She's helped her become so much more confident. Tara Hart. They'd written it like I'd said it myself. I hadn't. Seeing my name there made my hands shake. I filled out a complaint form on the licensing board's website and attached everything. Screenshots, charges, Cheryl's fake certification. No rant, no explanation, just proof. Paperwork. The weapon of the quiet. When I was done, I finally turned my phone face up. 5 missed calls from Vanessa, 2 from Mom, 1 from Dad. I ignored them all, which in this family probably counted as an act of war. They called again the next morning. I was making Ellie's lunch when my phone buzzed hard enough to rattle the counter. "You cut me off?" she shouted. "Are you insane?" "I have bills due. I used that card for supplies." Amazing. Still worried about her invoices while I was triaging childhood trauma. "You had no right using my card," I said. "Ellie's done." "I'm done." "It was for her good," she snapped. "Mom and Dad agree. You're blowing this way out of proportion." Cheryl was helping her balance things balance, I repeated. "That's what you call it?" "She was helping her tone it down," Vanessa said, voice rising. "Grace can't even speak up in class because Ellie takes all the space." For a second, I couldn't breathe. "So that's what this was," I said quietly. "You couldn't stand her being brighter." "Don't twist my words," she said, too fast. "I just wanted things fair." "Fair," I repeated. "You don't need the money, Tara." "Why make such a big deal over a few charges?" There it was, the family motto. You don't need it. "You used my child to make yours feel better," I said. "You think that's fair?" There was silence on the other end. Then she hung up. For a minute, I stood there staring at my reflection in the window. The funny part? I still wanted to believe she hadn't meant it. Then I remembered Ellie asking if I'd still love her if she was bad. I went to the drawer and pulled out the manila folder I hadn't opened in years, the one with the loan papers. The handwriting was neat. Serene Growth Wellness, business loan, $40,000. Vanessa's signature looped across the bottom, big and careless, like she'd been signing an autograph. The clause was clear. Borrower assumes personal liability if the business fails. I read it twice. $40,000, my most expensive lesson, or maybe my refund for peace and quiet. I called the attorney we'd used to buy the house. "Can you draft a demand letter?" I asked. "Amount?" $40,000. Plus interest. He didn't ask why. Maybe the tone of my voice said enough. For a few weeks, the house was calm. Ellie's laugh came back like a song she'd almost forgotten. She filled every blank corner with color. Paintings taped to the fridge, notes on the walls, hearts drawn in marker where she shouldn't have. Every time I saw one, I left it there. She was claiming space again. David said the quiet felt different now. "It's not heavy anymore," he told me one night. Then headlights cut across the living room wall. They didn't knock so much as attack the door. 3 sharp, angry hits. David stood, but I was already walking toward it. When I opened it, the cold hit first, then their voices. Mom. Dad. Vanessa. Mark trailing behind. Vanessa held the demand letter like a weapon. "You couldn't even call?" she said. "You had to humiliate me like this?" I stepped aside. "If you're going to yell, at least do it inside." The neighbors already think we're dramatic. They came in. My parents stiff and righteous, Vanessa shaking. Mom started first. "We came to talk sense into you." "Good luck," I said. "People have been trying for years." Dad's voice was firm, the way it used to be when I was 12 and wrong. "You've embarrassed this family. You've ruined your sister's business." I folded my arms. "She did that herself." I just stopped financing the cover-up. Vanessa's lip trembled. "You don't understand." I was trying to help Grace. I didn't want her to feel... "What?" I asked. "Small next to Ellie?" "She's sensitive," Mom said quickly. "You know how Grace is." "Yeah," I said. "Because she's been taught that being quiet makes her good. Just like Ellie was taught that being bright makes her bad." That silenced the room for a moment. Dad's jaw tightened. "You're twisting everything." I laughed softly. "You always say that when the truth sounds uglier than the lie." Vanessa snapped then. "I didn't mean for it to go that far." Cheryl was just supposed to guide her a little. "You know Ellie. She takes up all the air." I stared at her. "She's 7, Vanessa." "She takes up air because she's breathing." Tears filled her eyes, but she kept going. "I only wanted Grace to have a chance too." "She's always in Ellie's shadow." "Then teach your daughter to stand taller," I said. "You don't get to dim mine." Mom's voice broke. "Tara, please." "You've always had more. More money, more attention. You can afford to be generous." I felt something inside me settle. "You think this is about money?" They all stared at me, confused by my calm. "This isn't about the $40,000, I said. "It's about the day my daughter came home asking if I still loved her. Because someone you paid told her she didn't deserve to be loved." Mom started to cry. Vanessa wiped her face with the back of her hand. "It was supposed to help. It broke her," I said. "She was 7. You made her think being herself was wrong, and you call that help?" No one spoke. Even Dad's face crumpled a little, the way faces do when truth catches up to pride. I took a breath. I'm not angry anymore. I'm done. I can forgive a mistake. But this wasn't a mistake. It was envy pretending to be love. Vanessa whispered, "You hate me." I shook my head. "No, I just finally believe you." For a second, nobody moved. Then David stepped into the doorway behind me. "I think you should go," he said. His voice was calm, final. They hesitated, and for once, they obeyed. When the door closed, the sound was softer than I expected, almost like peace. Weeks passed. The fraud office confirmed Cheryl had never been licensed. Serene Growth shut down. Vanessa sold her house to pay the debt. My parents covered the rest. No one called. Ellie healed. Real therapy helped. So did laughter, and paint under her fingernails, and being told she could take up all the space she needed. One morning, an envelope arrived. Debt satisfied in full. David read it, smiled. "Guess peace finally paid up." I smiled back. About time. That weekend, Ellie's painting won first place at the school art show. A burst of yellow and red, a sun taking up the whole page. "I made it big," she said. "You said I could." I hugged her, feeling that old ache finally fade. "Always," I said. They called it confidence coaching. I call it the day my daughter learned she was never too much, and I finally learned I was enough. So what do you think? Did I go too far or not far enough? Let me know in the comments and subscribe for more.